Ulysses Bentley IV is primed for an explosive game versus Middle Tennessee.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make this show what it is. On today's episode, we're talking about how Ulysses Bentley might be ready for a breakout performance against Middle Tennessee. With their patchwork front seven and a solid secondary, the opportunity seems like it's going to be there for Bentley to rip off multiple explosive runs in this game. If Lane Kiffin is serious about committing to the ground game, Bentley could be in for a huge day. This matchup has some similarities to Derek Mason's first year at Vanderbilt. MTSU is still building, and while they've hit the portal to improve, they could struggle against an Ole Miss that is extremely powerful. And don't forget to make a second listen on the network. Chris Gordy from Locked On SEC and Corey Burton from Locked On Vandy provide more great insights on Ole Miss football and Ole Miss, honestly. So make sure you check them out. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. Download the Game Time app today. What time is it? Game Time. If you go to gametime.co, you can probably get tickets at a relatively decent price. So look that up for the Middle Tennessee game, because tickets are gone essentially for the SEC games, and there's not many left for Georgia Southern. Kind of Middle Tennessee is your last opportunity to get it through the ticket office, I do believe. So everybody has been concerned over the last, couple of days about the run game in Ole Miss. You've heard it. When people were nitpicking about the run game, they were concerned about that. And my question that I've had early in the week was the difference between, is it a symptom of a problem or is it an emblematic of a game plan issue? That was the question. We didn't really have a sample size big enough to determine if Ole Miss was having a trouble running the ball. If you look at these stats in the game, when the game actually mattered, Ulysses Bentley was the only running back that was below 5 yards per carry average on the whole team. Rashad Amos, who went in the second half, was also below 5 yards per carry average. Henry Parrish averaged 5 yards per carry, and then you had Dominique Thomas and Matt Jones, who came in at over 5 yards as well. Really interesting stuff, honestly. And I'm kind of curious to see exactly what can happen in this game. Whenever you have Ulysses Bentley, who I call a plus Jerry and Ely. Now, this season, he is going to be the feature back. And that's the reason he was brought in, even though Henry Parrish started in the last game. But I think this is the game to where a running back that had 6 carries for 23 yards against Furman kind of breaks out. We talked to Sam Dalton a little bit later on in the show, and he talked about how the front seven for this Middle Tennessee unit isn't quite there. The strength of the defense is the secondary. Now, Ole Miss is going to have trouble against every secondary that they go against because they are probably the best wide receiver room in the whole country. But Lane Kiffin has proven to be a coach that is willing to take the path of least resistance when it comes to moving the ball on offense. And against Middle Tennessee, it appears like it will be the front seven. Now, Derek Mason and Middle Tennessee used the transfer portal to find like nose guards and to bring people in to be a 3-4, but they don't really have the personnel yet to run a 3-4 defense. They've run a 4-2-5 defense over the recent history. Heck, I think Tyrone Nix was there last. So Derek Mason trying to convert his team over through the transfer portal, which means it can go a little bit faster than it did at Vanderbilt, but it's still going to take a little bit of time, which means they're going to have people that are out of position a little bit playing the position in the front seven, which means holes are going to open, which means the Ole Miss running backs are going to be able to get to the second level, theoretically. The person that has the most capability to make a team pay whenever you get to the second and third level of defense is Ulysses Bentley IV. And this is why I think that Ulysses Bentley is going to have not one, but two explosive runs in this football game. And he could absolutely destroy Middle Tennessee from the start. Now, destroy is an operative term. Ole Miss is a 41-point favorite in this football game right now, according to FanDuel. But if you're looking for that fast start, if you're looking for a situation to where starters get out of the game in halftime and you kind of take some of the wear and tear off of the bodies, the path goes through Ulysses Bentley in this football game. And him breaking a couple of long touchdown runs off of zone reads and all that, you can see where this is a 38-0 game in the first half. I can see a situation to where that happens. Now, Derek Mason made his living off of being a defensive coordinator at Stanford that used to be an Oregon killer. If you look at Oregon's tempo, if you look at what Oregon did, he had the ability and the secret sauce to stop Oregon's offense. That's how they got famous. That is how David Shaw and Derek Mason kind of came up on that Stanford system. So make no mistake, Middle Tennessee is going to be prepared for the Ole Miss tempo and all of this, and they're going to have an excellent plan. Ole Miss is going to have to out-personnel this team. This isn't a situation where I think Middle Tennessee is going to win. This is honestly isn't a situation where I think Middle Tennessee is going to be within 3 touchdowns. So Derek Mason, when I say they might provide some resistance, a problem, it might be a situation where you take MTSU to cover, or Ole Miss wins by 31 points. Maybe the final score is 45-14 because Nicholas Vattiato is somebody that can be dangerous and is going to make plays in this football game. And the running back for Middle Tennessee is going to make plays in this football game. But Ole Miss, as a defensive unit, has really good players across the front and all across the front seven. And their secondary is also very solid. You can see a situation where Trey Amos gets matched up on Amari Kelly and they just kind of turn him loose. So you can see that this game might provide a challenge in certain areas. It's not the scoreboard. Don't hear me say the scoreboard, but it might provide a challenge in certain areas that allows Ole Miss to get a little bit better and a little bit more ready for Wake Forest and for Kentucky. Because you have the Georgia Southern game that's going to be a final tune-up for Kentucky. Because I think Kentucky is a pretty good team right now. From what I've seen, they're pretty good. I think Middle Tennessee, they're going to struggle because this is Derek Mason's first year and they're doing a complete basic scheme shift, going from the 4-3 to the 3-4, going from a air raid offense into a 12 personnel normal offense indeed. So we'll see how it goes. Anyway, we have Sam Doughton from GoBlueRaiders.com coming up right after this to tell you all about Middle Tennessee. When you're hiring from your small business, you need to find the right professionals, the people who are truly going to fit your role and help your business grow. That's why you need to check out LinkedIn Jobs. I've personally used LinkedIn to find some top-notch candidates, and the platform really makes it easy to filter through and find quality people quickly. LinkedIn just isn't a job board. It's a network full of professionals that you will not find anywhere else. And what's great is even those who are not actively searching might see your role and realize it's exactly what they're looking for. Over 70% of LinkedIn users don't even visit other major job sites. So if you're not on LinkedIn, you might be missing out on the best candidates. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate to answer their job posting within 24 hours. That's fast. And honestly, it's what you need in today's job market. So if you want to hire like a professional, use LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. College football is back, and it's not too late to catch up before the season starts. Whether it's the SEC, the ACC, the Big 10, or the Big 12, you can get it all from Locked On's stable of college experts by subscribing to the Locked On College Football Podcast. Who has a chance to make the playoff? What teams will cause chaos in their new conferences? Everything you need to know all in one place. Be sure to follow and subscribe to the Locked On College Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Sam Doughton from GoBlueRaiders.com joins the show right now. And Sam, Ole Miss put up 76 points over the weekend, and they are a 41-point favorite over middle in this game. This has to be a weird feeling going around there. It's kind of this is a true definition of a bye game, is it not?
To some extent, yes, but I think the team understands that they have an opportunity as well to make a name for themselves in a way that maybe people aren't expecting. It was only 2 years ago that Middle Tennessee went into Hard Rock Stadium, which is obviously a very different environment than Vaught Hemingway, and upset Miami, 45-31. So there are guys on the team that were a part of that team back then. So they're not going to come in looking to roll over by any means. But you're also being reasonable with your expectations and know that you've got a lot to clean up. That was sort of the first game on tape over the weekend against Tennessee Tech, and on a roster with a lot of new guys, over 60 new guys on the roster this year as well. But there's a handful of transfers also that are coming from SEC schools that are applying their trade in Murfreesboro now. So they're coming in, looking to make a name for themselves, whatever that may look like, whether it's in a win or, looking better in defeat than maybe the 41-point spread is suggesting at the moment.
Derek Mason, whenever he went from Stanford to Vanderbilt, he did the transition to an offense that was real similar to what Stanford did. And because of that, Vanderbilt didn't necessarily have the personnel to do what he wanted to do. Does that look like it could be resurfacing at middle, or is this a situation where he's kind of learned his lessons, kind of sticking to what Stockstill did?
No, they're very much in a transition on the offensive side. Rick Stockstill was somebody that in the latter part of his time in Middle Tennessee very much leaned closer to the air raid tree and whose offensive coordinators were. A lot of 10 personnel spreading out the field, looking to find people in space. This offense uses the tight end a lot. They were probably in 12 personnel more than they were in 11 at times this past week. And so when you're building a tight end room basically from scratch, they didn't really have a true tight end on the roster at all last season. It's not going to look as much as what you might expect when you're running a more traditional pro style, control the clock type offense that Coach Mason prefers, obviously, as a defense first type guy. So they are still in a transition on that front, but you're going to see, I think we got 5 guys listed as co-starters at tight end right now. They rotate them in, and they all have different skill sets. And big guy I know there is Holden Willis, who was a slot receiver for us last year. We list him at 6'4", and he was playing in the slot. So he ran a lot of sort of the tight end route tree out of a slot in an air raid last year, and still is that threat, has a good connection with quarterback Nicholas Vattiato. And is somebody that Coach Mason highlighted, somebody that didn't get involved enough in the game plan this past week against Tennessee Tech. So somebody they're hoping to get more involved as the season goes on and starting this weekend in Oxford.
Would it be safe to say that Vattiato is probably Middle's best player, or at least the most dangerous?
Yeah, I would say so, Steven. He was probably the biggest piece Mason had retained from the previous staff. A lot of we have guys that were on the team last year that are starting at Vanderbilt, starting at Miami, starting at some big name programs these days. And Nick was a guy that very easily could have gone and competed for a spot at some of those, lower to mid tier P4 schools, in my opinion. But there's only 134 starting jobs at the FBS level, and he felt he had a really good shot to retain this one under the new staff. And he very quickly, showed his ability to the new staff when they came in. As you mentioned earlier on your show this week, he's a guy that has some dual threat ability that's maybe not obvious on paper, but is somebody that has grown that part of his running game, particularly out of, some spread formations a lot in recent years. He was a kid that started as a true freshman due to injury in the quarterback room here at Middle. I've been with him his whole career here, and has grown exponentially since then. Good deep ball, good accuracy on short range. Maybe needs a little bit better accuracy, long range. But can really burn you in a lot of different ways if you're not careful. So luckily Ole Miss has a good defensive front that tends to get pressure. That tends to be the one way that you can sort of disrupt them a little bit. Is some good pressure up front, particularly from 4 down sets. So he doesn't have an alert that he can check into as easily. But he's somebody that's extremely talented and somebody that Lane Kiffin has appropriately keyed in on this week from what I've read.
Yeah, would it be safe to say that the comp, especially at the G5 level, is the quarterback that moved up to the SEC this year, Taylor Green? There's some similarities there.
I'd say a little bit. I mean, I think Diego Pavia might be even a little bit better of a fit, the guy
Okay.
at Vanderbilt. As far as his ability to sort of do both things, he's a little more like in system than Pavia is. Pavia's a little bit more of a playmaker on the outside that can, go out of structure and make something happen. Nick doesn't do that as much. If he's out of structure, he's normally, saving a play rather than making some big explosive out of it. He's getting a 5-yard gain on a scramble rather than maybe scrambling and looking over top and trying to find somebody. But he's somebody that executes in system really, really well. And I think his accuracy is underrated just because he throws such a nice deep ball, and that tends to be what you check into if you're an offense that is trying to run it or in the air raid last year. But I think he really makes his bread and butter on some of the shorter passes that maybe don't get as much attention.
Okay, we talk about Nicholas Vattiato. What are some other players that Ole Miss fans need to know about before the game Saturday?
One player that might be a little familiar with is Amari Kelly, who's sort of Nick's top option on the outside, a wide receiver. Transfer from Auburn. That's where he met Mason when Mason was the defensive coordinator there his freshman year in 2021. Never really saw the field any substantial time for the Tigers. Had some spots here or there, particularly rotating in late in games. But has, quickly built a good rapport with Nick and was a key in the winning drive against Tennessee Tech this week. Caught a big 4th and 5 pass for a huge gain. Took us in the field goal range and set up the winning touchdown. So definitely somebody to know. And then coming out of the backfield, Frank Pizant has been a stalwart at running back for us. Particularly doing the little things that running backs have to do at the collegiate level. Really good blocker. He was actually recruited to middle as a linebacker before he moved over to running back when he got here. Very physical runner. He was the guy that scored that 30-yard touchdown at the end of the game. And, he's somebody that would have good size no matter where he played at the college football level. And so at a school like Middle, you're fortunate to have a bigger back like that can, break a tackle and bruise some guys up a little bit.
Now, Rick Stock's still in his team. He was known as kind of an offensive dude. Is this an offensive-based team at this point?
I definitely think they're leaning a little bit more on their defense right now. I think that they have some experience on defense. The defense was, I think, as a whole, more impressive than the offense was this past week against an FCS opponent, admittedly. But they've got a ton of experience on that side. Brian Stewart's the defensive coordinator there, former NFL DC, former Maryland defensive coordinator. Somebody Coach Mason's known for a long time, and obviously Coach Mason's somebody that is very hands-on with what the defense is doing at every step of practice, every step of the day. So, I mean, this is a team that just by design of the offense, where they're going to be trying to control the clock and hold the ball a little bit more than maybe they did in the past. I think is going to hope their defense can keep them in games and take advantage of maybe some shorter time to sort of deal with opposing offenses at times. But safe to be seen there. It's a lot of things to figure out for this team with so many new faces in the weeks ahead.
All right. Whenever we come back, thank you for watching the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. We're going to ask Sam what happened Saturday against Tennessee Tech, because if you look at the plays and at the highlights of the game, it should not have been a one-score game, but yet it was a one-score game. We'll find out that just after this. Game Time is the place to get your Ole Miss tickets with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets. Hey, you can get good prices right now in the Game Time app to get into the Middle Tennessee Ole Miss game. This might be the last chance for you to get good prices to get into an Ole Miss football game this season. They have views from all the seats. Vaught Hemingway does not have a bad seat, but you can check out a view from that seat before you buy the ticket as well. They have the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection. Take the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets with Game Time. And with this being the most anticipated season in Ole Miss history, I may be able to help you out with tickets as well. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, Sam. I have to know what happened in that Tennessee Tech game. I'm sitting there watching the highlights, and the way that people need to know, if you go on YouTube and watch the highlights, it was all like middle plays going. So you basically had the scoreboard at the bottom to make a thing, and it was like 7-0, 14-0, 21-0, 21-2, and then all of a sudden you looked up and it was 25-24. What happened?
Well, I mean, you had a couple big swings there. First off, I think the offense had a script that worked really, really well in the first quarter. They got, through their 15, 20 scripted plays and didn't, put a blade of grass wrong on any of them. And then that helped them jump out to a big lead. Got a turnover on Tennessee Tech's first drive. Ended up, getting a hit on the quarterback that knocked their starting quarterback out of the game at one point. So Tech was having to adjust to a lot of different things early on. They're another team that's had a coaching change this offseason, had a lot of transition as well. But Middle was looking great. Everything that the coaches were preaching in the offseason was working for about the first 20 minutes. And then, Tennessee Tech got a really good special teams play. They had a punt down at the 1. So Middle Tennessee comes out sort of in, jumbo set, looking just to get it out of the end zone. And they burst through the line, get a safety. And to me, that's sort of when the momentum of the game started to change. They were able to get the ball back on a free kick, got some points at the end of halftime, make it 21-5. And then, they were able to – Middle Tennessee went empty their, first possession. I think it might have even been a 3-and-out, first time out. And at that point, Tennessee Tech got belief. Tennessee Tech's actually a very old rival of Middle Tennessee. We played for a rivalry trophy back when both of us were in, 1AA back then. So that there was some bad blood there for it, and they stayed motivated. And Middle offensively, what the word Coach Mason used after the game was stagnant. They ran against a lot of loaded boxes right up the middle. I think they were trying to trust their line to sort of win the matchup against what they viewed as a physically inferior opponent. And when you have that many guys in the box, it just didn't really work out that way. So they were forced into a lot of third and longs. And I think the message after the game was that if the team was a little bit more creative on offense, sort of in the second half, outside of the final drive, things wouldn't have been as bad as they were. But when your offense is getting, kicked off the field and your defense is coming back out there, some of those depth things start to show up. Had a couple starting cornerbacks get knocked out with injury during the game. One of them came back in the middle of the game, but you're adjusting to that as well. And then the offensive line lost 2 starters in the game. So they're sort of jumbling that in the middle of the game as well. So a lot of things went wrong, some of which was controllable, some of which was not. But ultimately, they put together one really good final drive that was capped off with an explosive, 30-yard run to win the game. And, first win for a coach that is brand new here and working in so many guys, you sort of take it and move on. I know a lot of fans wanted something a little more and, in my opinion, got something a little more first 20 minutes or so. And so figuring out how to take that first 20 minutes and make it a full 60, I think is going to be the biggest key for this team this season in particular.
You mentioned injuries and the 2 offensive linemen and 2 defensive backs. How are they looking for the Saturday competition? Are they going to be back?
Not sure at this point. I think the cornerback that went out, Derry McDonald, is pretty close to coming back. Maybe not this week, maybe next week. The offensive lineman, I do not think they anticipate being back in the near future. So you're going to be having at least 2 new starters on that group this week, including a new center. So, opportunity for a defensive front for Ole Miss to take their chances, get some licks, and, opportunity for Middle Tennessee to learn who they've got in that room right now, who they can trust.
Let's switch it on over to the defensive side of the ball real quick. You mentioned that might be a group that's a little bit ahead at this point. What do they do defensively, and who are the standouts?
It's a very interesting scheme, Steven. Coach Mason's somebody that's always believed in sort of a 3-4 front, but the roster really wasn't built for a 3-4 defense when he got here. He did his best to sort of get the nose guards and the outside backers that he wanted, but it's kind of a hybrid system. They're doing some, 4-3 concepts out of sort of a 3-4 look at times. But they can be pretty dynamic. They can blitz 5, blitz 3, blitz 4. In the front, but the real calling card of the defense, I think, is going to be the secondary. They have a lot of really experienced safeties, both at Middle Tennessee and from elsewhere, and some good experience at cornerback as well, with a lot of starts in between them. So I think it's a group that's going to trust the back end to do their jobs and hope that a younger front seven, a more inexperienced front seven, can develop over the course of the season. But you're going to see some creative blitz packages. You're going to see the mix-up coverages play to play. They're not going to stay in the same thing, for a whole drive necessarily. And they've been working really hard on disguising stuff as well. So hopefully they'll get a chance to use some of that against an offense that's going to be tempo and maybe force them into some more vanilla looks that maybe they'd like to be in at times.
Yeah, they do go really fast, and now that they have the helmet technology, they go really fast. It's absolutely kind of nuts to see. Special teams wise, what does middle have special team wise? Kicker, punter, return game.
Well, kicker's a longtime veteran, Zeke Rankin. He's been starter all 4 years I've been here, a place kicker. Really solid inside of 40 yards. I think inside of 40 yards, he's almost automatic at this point. It makes it from about 50 at times as well, but turns into more of a 50% kicker when you get too much beyond 45. So the good news for middle is that Coach Mason believes in analytics and those types of things, tends to go for it a little bit more on fourth down than you might expect from a coach that is, a defensive coach maybe you think would be a little more conservative in those situations. He tends to go for it in sort of those awkward spots on the field and did it, several times against Tennessee Tech this past weekend. So you might see them roll the dice a bit. Punter, brand new freshman, Grant Chadwick, had probably not the day he wanted in his first collegiate start, didn't hit a punt over 40 yards at home. Now, it was a very rainy night. There was some, other circumstances there. Game was delayed by over 2 hours from starting due to lightning in the area. So had some other circumstances, but definitely looking to improve those numbers this week and in the season ahead. And then special teams wise, they brought in Luke Pascal, who's been a special teams coordinator at UNC and UMass, and most recently at Louisiana. Former letterman here, actually played for both Rick Stockstill and Andy McCollum during his time. And he's going to be aggressive with it. They look to return the ball on kicks as often as they can. Punt, they tend to be more willing to take what they give, but on kickoff returns, you're going to see, I think, more kickoffs as long as they don't go through the back of the end zone than you might expect teams to do in the age where you can fair catch it and get to the 25.
All right, what do you think the expectation is for Middle Tennessee in this game?
I mean, I always see it as you want to try to cover. So whatever I tend to trust the people in the desert. So, luckily the good news is that if they're able to control the clock a little bit, maybe not so much of runs up the middle, but more, throws to the flats, runs to the outside, things like that. You've got a chance to keep it competitive for, a good quarter of the game. Maybe even, full half, depending on how successful they are. Because I think the defense has enough talent that they're going to get a few stops here and there. Maybe not initially, but they'll find it. There'll be a couple times where they get a stop, and then you've just got to keep it in that 28, 35 point range, and I think you'll be satisfied with the progress you've made week to week. And obviously, get in the game, get some turnovers. Weird things happen. That was sort of the key of the Miami game. Is they got some early turnovers in that one on the defensive side. Put Miami behind the 8 ball, forced them to throw the ball a lot more, and were able to take advantage. So that tends to be the recipe to any sort of upset. I'm not expecting anything like that this week, but anything like that can help this team, and is something they're going to be looking to pursue aggressively as well.
All right, so now the important question that everybody wants to know about. Is Middle at least going to be wearing the silver lids and the silver pants?
I actually don't know. They typically go white and blue for their first road game. That's what they wore at Alabama last year for the first road game. There's a good chance they stay in the silver, though, at least on the helmets, because they some coaches don't like to switch helmets week to week, particularly with the radio stuff, but they're still working out. But I'll keep an eye out. I haven't talked to our equipment guys this week. I'll probably go pop my head in right now, see what Larry says, shoot you a text, and you can throw it in on your side when this publishes in the morning. See what you think.
I think that's just a fantastic look. If you go back to, I think, back in the early 2000s when Eli Manning was at Ole Miss, they played middle, and that was their look. And I just thought that was just very Kansas State look on the road.
Oh, it's very clean. We always wear the traditional silver helmets, blue tops for our first home game. And to me, it's our cleanest look. It upsets me when I fire up, EA Sports College Football 25 and our default home look has the white helmets, because to me, it always defaults to the silver. And, I think it's, like you said, it's timeless. It's sort of a classic, for our older fans, brings it's sort of a connection back to when we were in the 1AA playoffs on a consistent basis. And so people really like that aspect of it. And then, from our new school thing, we tend to not co-brand, but allude to the Oakland Raiders a little bit in some of the stuff that we do branding wise. And it sort of alludes to that as well when you got the silver, white, silver. So I'm hopeful, but we'll see when they run out of the tunnel what they're wearing. Typically, first road games has been a lot of white helmets, white shirts, blue pants the past couple of years, but they always surprise me. So you never know.
All right, we'll see exactly how it goes. Be safe heading down to Oxford if you're going, and if anybody watching this is going down to Oxford, Mississippi, please be safe on your travels. Sam, thank you very much for stopping by. And if we run into each other again, I'd love to talk to you.
Thanks, Steven. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we are the #1 Ole Miss podcast out there. And we thank you. Your support means everything to us. And also, thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day. Now, go check out Locked On College Football Podcast. From NIL deals to never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description down below, so there's no need to even search. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And also, exciting news. You can now become a Locked On Ole Miss Insider, the best and the easiest way to stay updated on all things Ole Miss sports. Our texting program sends you notifications on anything relevant on Ole Miss without the hassle of message boards filled with trolls. Enjoy a 14-day free trial and experience the future of college sports coverage. We're constantly adding new perks as we grow, so do not miss out. The link is down in the description. And for those of you watching on YouTube, we'll send you to Locked On College Football and Locked On College Sports right now. Hotty toddy, everyone.